historical man, and Palm Top Tyrant. How are you all doing today?
I'm doing alright.
Oh, that's
I
good.
have once again raged at Darkest Dungeon and nearly broke my table once again.
Speaking of Darkest Dungeon, the topic is about monsters, and Darkest Dungeon has monsters.
Beautiful.
It
And
also
we haven't
it
asked
also
Palm
turns
yet.
you into one, if I'm being honest.
I've become a roid raged carbuncle at that point.
You become a
Not
demon.
carbuncle, straight from hell.
What's your Twitch again? I wanna send it to my friends.
I
Twitch.tv/KaijuDragon567. Which is what the streamers are watching.
Wasn't followed. That's weird.
Dude, you don't follow me? How could you? Now you're a monster.
Apparently.
Although, speaking of monsters, Cross, you said that you were doing some research, this past week? I can talk, I promise.
Well, yeah, but that was specifically on kaijus
It's still monsters.
and the kaiju genre. Well, I mean, that was purely because I don't know very much about it, and
Well, it could be a good introductory thing, and then we can, go on from there.
alright, so do you want my academic opinion then?
Yeah, give me your academic opinion. I need it.
My first major academic opinion, there is almost zero academic writing on the kaiju genre.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Was it
Now,
only on specific things, or was it just next to nothing?
Godzilla has a shit ton of writing on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, everyone and their grandmother has written an academic paper on Godzilla. However, and a lot of this that I will be talking about today comes from, always cite your sources, a book by Jason Barr, The Kaiju Film, A Critical Study of Cinema's Biggest Monsters.
Okay, what does it talk about? Cross?
Basically, hold on.
No, it's okay.
Basically, what he talks about for why specifically we end up having this very little critical study is due to a huge overlap, at least a very little critical study in English, is due to a large overlap between science fiction and the kaiju genre as it came about during the 50s and 60s, where what ended up happening was a lot of these critics would end up just putting the kaiju genre just as a subcategory of sci-fi, which then buried it under a ton of it would get brought up during science fiction discussions and critical studies, but ended up burying the specifics of the kaiju genre of film, which it's kind of strange to consider it sci-fi now, because although there are laps, there's crossovers, there are very specifically things that are you don't necessarily have to be sci-fi to be a kaiju film.
Right. In fact, you can even enjoy horror and some kaiju movies.
Yeah, it's sort of a bad overlap then. So because of this, it ended up getting constantly put together, because, as he points out, that I didn't think about, giant monster films were already a thing even before Godzilla came out in 1955 and made it to the USA. Here, let me read you a list of these. We have The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, 1953. We have It Came from Beneath the Sea, 1955. King Dinosaur, 1955. Monster from the Ocean Floor, 1954. And I can't read this one because my handwriting's terrible. But then probably the most interesting one is the film Them. If you guys have heard of that one.
Was that the one with the giant ants, if I'm correct?
That is the one with the giant ants from 1954. The thing that I found really funny about the 1954 film Them, had to be because like all the trailers were like, it's indescribable, they're horrific, they're absolutely terrifying, you can only describe them as them. And it's just giant ants. Like everyone knows what a giant ant, everyone knows what an ant looks like, and everyone knows what the hell a giant ant is. So that was definitely weird. And even going further back, we have King Kong in 1933, which King Kong is now kind of part of this kaiju subgenre, if I understand it a bit more accurately.
I'm more into it.
He's one of the main ones, at least for America.
Yeah, and that predates the kaiju genre as we know it, starting with Godzilla by 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
So then, because of that, and because of like these earlier films, which like Beast from 20,000 Fathoms did end up being considered science fiction, I can understand why films like them and everything were just considered science fiction films. That ended up then when Godzilla came over and the kaiju genre sort of came on over, with even things like Power Rangers or Ultraman and other things that sort of slowly made their way over. They just got subcategorized under science fiction.
Which honestly is a shame because even some of those old kaiju movies tended to hit different notes than any science fiction movies from what I can see. Like, obviously, first Godzilla movie, that's very easy to talk about. Very easy to talk about, but even Mothra touched on some notes that aren't really, mentioned as much back then than they are now. Because that one, obviously talked about, like, greediness, businessmen, people using nature for profit, which wasn't as used as much back then, but obviously we see that a lot more days. And sorry, go ahead.
That's still very much within the sci-fi genre is the thing, though.
It is.
It's a common trope I've seen in sci-fi not just novels, fiction period. Of how beautiful nature is compared to more in
Avatar.
evils of industrial.
It's
Avatar. Others ones too.
It's less so that how I would put it, it's less so that the issue comes from these films hitting different notes, as you put it, because that's not super relevant to genre classification.
Right.
It's more so that it had developed its own. It has, and at that point was developing, especially at the point in the 1960s, had developed its own tropes and its own specific calling cards, essentially, enough to distinguish it as its own. And again, like you said, with certain things, you don't necessarily have to have science fiction for it to be a kaiju film. A lot of them crossed over with, things like Godzilla, where it was like, oh, well, what created it? Nuclear weapons, that's sci-fi. But like you said with Mothra is like mystics. Mothra has fairies. It's not a sci-fi film.
It's a lot more fantasy, if anything.
Yeah. So that's where sort of this critical overlap and critical misunderstanding comes from.
I can very clearly see that, especially with. You'd think that people wouldn't classify it like that because of, some of the other types of monster movies that you would initially probably think of as, oh, well, that's just sci-fi. But they probably fit more into the horror genre. Like, I guess a quick example would be Alien.
Really, it's horror and sci-fi.
It's a horror sci-fi.
It's a bit of both, but you can clearly see that it somewhat leans more into the horror vibe.
Yes, but there's
Depends
no
on the
point.
movie, really.
There's no point. Yeah, that's fair. That's very true.
I mean,
Like,
Predator's
because sometimes
Predator's
they even
sci-fi.
feel like more like action flicks than anything else.
Sure.
For the first Predator was more of a horror movie. It still had sci-fi elements, but it was still more of a horror movie. If you want,
That
like,
was more of
horror
an action
sci-fi.
movie to me, if we're being honest.
That's the first half, and then the second half was just the Predator slaughtering everyone.
No.
And-
Now, hang on.
Am I wrong?
To me.
Okay.
And here's the thing to note, even like within academics, horror genre is not a science. It's not rigid. Genre is extremely fluid. The purpose of genre studies isn't to define rigid boundaries, but to create some kind of collective set of circumstances that we can point to classify things and maybe group them.
Hmm.
Hence why, and in terms of films, like there are very few straight genre films where it's like, this is the genre, this is it. A lot of it's crossover. For example, some of the most successful in terms of monetary measurements, the Avengers films, those cross into multiple different genres. Part of it is drama, part of it is action, part of it is comedy. It's not like it's one straight piece of genre fiction.
Not one genre, period. Like,
Which I guess it has kind of taken on its own subgenre of the superhero film. But that's a whole thing we have to still unpack.
Yeah, it is.
we're talking about monsters here, not superheroes. Well, superheroes can be monsters, just.
I don't know. I think
mean-
the Blob could be a superhero. I mean,
Not the Blob,
Com-
not the fucking.
they are a comic book character, if we're being fair here.
Yeah, but we're talking about the pink thing.
Oh, yeah,
the pink
the
that
Jello
scared the
one.
shit out of me.
That was a great remake, though, if we're being completely fair and on that topic. Because,
It
the old movie was a little cheesy. It was a little cheesy, but, it was still a new idea. It was still something. And,
yeah, because
mhm.
because the one made in the 50s was a direct. It literally was almost like a propaganda film in the way it was structured. Because the Blob symbolizes in the movie, I think the director of the original film even said it's supposed to be an allegory for communism, and it was 50s America. So,
I mean, a lot of movies are just straight propaganda for a lot of things. Like, that's not surprising.
I know,
Okay,
but
what the hell was the remake propaganding? Because, that shit was scarring. I mean, it
I
clearly
don't know, I
scarred
haven't
you.
seen it.
they could have just kept the whole they could have just kept the whole communist thing, really.
Maybe, but when was it remade?
The 80s.
Yeah,
That's
the
a
80s.
really weird period to keep the communism thing then.
Yeah.
I mean, the Soviet Union was still a thing.
Do
Yeah,
like a
it's still
straight
a
horror
thing, but
film at that point.
It's
Yeah.
not. Yeah, it was still a thing, but like it was not nearly as much of a like prominent figurehead in the cultural milieu.
Of America at the time.
Yeah, you weren't walking down the street looking at each other, going, "Oh, that guy might be a commie. Oh, that one's a
Might be
commie."
I don't know.
might be
Yeah.
I still do that, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, it's also because Kai, you grill too, so I guess the boomer genetics really did carry over to you.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Damn commies.
But you see that in a lot of different. It's just that the Blob, the original one, to Little Historical Man especially, scarred me because
It
I
was
thought,
gruesome.
oh, it's gonna be a cool movie, right? Oh, big blob thing scares town. And then I saw the scene where one of the girls is being turned into Jello, basically.
It was
And you see her face melt
yeah,
off.
it was the doorway scene, right? I think.
The doorway scene, yeah.
Oh god.
And then they pulled the
Mhm.
arm and then it ripped off.
Yeah, Cross, the remake is really messed up because it goes full on with the kills.
The gore?
Yeah.
Gore.
Like a man.
It's the 80s. It makes sense.
A man gets dragged down like a drain pipe or something.
All right, his body's like half liquefied, like it's still there, but like he's like his bodily like muscles and like functions are like completely ceased, and he's like half jellified.
Yeah, then there was that one fucked up scene with the ceiling where they just look up and the guy's like half alive being eaten.
Oh,
I
dude,
mean-
I love that scene. It's so good.
I mean, the priest survived of all things,
Yeah, there's
and that
a lot of surprising people who survived, but that was a fucked movie.
I mean,
Yeah.
I like the ending. That at least it's gone.
1988. Yeah, this would have been like 14 years something after the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So it was definitely in that time period of like intense gore.
Violence.
Hyper violence, as
mean-
you were saying.
It's actually not my. As much as I love The Blob for being a good movie, it's not my favorite horror movie or monster movie for that matter.
I mean,
What's your favorite monster movie?
Yeah, let's
The
go with
Thing.
that. Oh,
The
that's a
Thing.
No,
good one. That's a
oh,
good one.
dude,
I
I'm
wrote-
with
I
you
wrote
right
that
there.
down. I wrote that down.
listen, because the thing about the thing that makes it such a good movie to me is that the characters are genuinely because it's a classic trope in a lot of horror films that are popular, that the main heroes have an IQ, a single digit IQ, a
No,
smooth
they're
brain.
actually smart in this movie is the thing,
Yeah, no,
and
and
still
the thing
die.
they're intelligent. It's they're fighting something that's beyond their comprehension.
Well,
That could become
they're
one of
fighting something that's technically better than them somehow.
my favorite scene in the whole film is that one guy who was stuck in the shed trying to hang himself. That was
Dude,
my favorite scene.
That's the most fucking relatable moment in the movie. Would you want to go through that movie? Out of all of the monsters that I can think of, the Thing is like one of the few things that I would just avoid with all of my effort, all of my fucking effort.
The Blob.
The Blob's pretty bad, but I feel like the Thing is a little worse because, come on, the base idea that it's going to use you to trick other people sounds horrifying to me.
What's Crossstar's opinion on the Thing, though? That movie.
Very curious, actually.
I have not seen any of the Thing films. That's something that is on my bucket list that I've just never had the chance to go around to.
Watch the first one.
That is so
The
surprising.
You
first
mean
one, don't watch
the-
the second one.
Okay. You mean when you say the first one, you're
Only
talking about 1982,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
not
John
the Thing
Carpenter.
from Another World, 1951.
You should also watch that just to laugh.
It wasn't the 1982 version. I thought it was a standalone film, not the
Oh, I
Thing.
thought you were talking about the remake.
Well, there's a remake. Okay, there's the Thing, which is 1982. David is it a Cronenberg film? No, it's a John Carpenter film.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Kurt Russell and the gang.
Yeah. But that is a remake, technically, of a 52 film or a 51 film, I believe, called The Thing from Another World.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even put those two together since like they don't even have the same title. I only know about the Thing with Kurt Russell, and then there was a remake after the fact.
Yeah,
that
there
decided
was
to go
there
with
was a
more
remake in
CGI
2011.
and opted for like they had all the practical effects actually made for the movie, but for whatever reason, someone made a last-minute decision to not use any of them and just go with CGI, which terrible choice, honestly.
I think for one of the shots they tried to do a mix of the two, which was god awful. God awful.
Don't mix mediums like that. It's just CGI, at least at that time, was not good enough to like go back and forth.
It wasn't ready. It wasn't ready.
Wasn't ready. But if I do have to say the film you should watch, the 1982 remake. That is
Yeah, watch that one.
one of it's surprisingly when it came out, it got bombarded by critics at the time.
It was people who thought it was too gruesome and just it's just gore fest. That's all it is.
Then you watch. When I watched the movie when I think it was 14, I thoroughly enjoyed the film because I wasn't a 7-year-old.
Horror as a genre is just critically panned in general.
Mm-hmm.
No, they have the most memorable movies.
It's been only very recently within academic studies that like horror has kind of come forth as being something that you can academically take seriously. Before that, because here is the thing, and I'm sure none of you are going to be surprised by this. There's still cliques and shit in academia. There's still tons of like things where it's just like, you think that's worthy of study? What are you, stupid and lowbrow?
What are you, a big dummy head?
So yeah, you still get a ton of stuff where it's just things are just overlooked because everyone in academia, if you aren't careful, ends up thinking the same thing.
They're kind of in a little bubble in which, I mean, some people have the same attitudes towards comedy and other, comedy and horror, I think, definitely are, like, the quote-unquote low rungs of filmmaking, right?
Comedy, actually... I think horror had the worst end of it. Comedy had quite a few critical talkabouts, and comedy itself is something that, at the least in my time studying, was very easy to become critically aware of, because a lot of the times when people approach things, it's like, well, like with these things, like, well, comedy, the point is that you can get away with saying things and doing things that are against the cultural norm, and even advocating for things that are against the cultural norm, under the guise of it's just a joke. To give a sort of a cross sort of example, like for example, there's that scene at the end of this older film where this guy is like reveals that he's actually a cross-dressing man, because to this guy next to him who's like deathly in love with him. Like at one point, like he takes up, he's like, John, I'm a man, and he goes, whatever, nobody's perfect. And so the joke kind of there is, haha, they're gonna get married or whatever, like he doesn't care. But it still would have then been like, you couldn't put that in a drama film because then it would be taken seriously, and then people would be really angry that, you know, a film is promoting homosexuality in like the 1950s.
Okay, I
So-
get you, I get you.
So comedy is a great bastion for just being able to put out ideas that are not overtly radical, but definitely you can put out some tougher, less socially acceptable ideas, just because it's all under the guise of a joke. And so whenever you bring it up, like if somebody gets mad, you just fall back, you go, it's just such a joke, bro. It's just a joke. Why are you taking this seriously?
It's just a prank, bro.
On top of that, like, what are some good comedy monster or kaiju movies you've seen, Cross?
I've told you, I've not watched very many kaiju films.
I'm
Well,
gonna say,
monster films then.
if you want a funny in kaiju films, watch any of the latter half of the Showa series for
Don't-
any monster film.
Don't watch that. Don't actually watch that, please. For the love of God, you will hate every single moment of it, and it will ruin kaiju movies in general for you. Don't do that
Yeah,
to yourself.
it will, but if
I-
you
The
want
one
to laugh,
where the Gigan gift comes from?
yes,
Actually,
yes.
now that you bring that up, now that you bring up Showa, I do have something I want to mention
Oh,
from this writer, from Jason Barr, is he names 3 separate eras that are currently ongoing for kaiju film, and I kind of want to get your guys's, because you're more so the fans
mhm.
and understand this a bit more. He names 3 separate eras. He names the Showa era, which lasts 1930 to 1979.
Right.
He then names Heisei as 1980 to 1999, and then a third era genre of these films, the Millennium era, which is 2000 and onward. And I don't think we've, at least for him, we've not exited the Millennium yet.
We
I'd,
did, we did kind of end the Millennium series for at least Godzilla, because we've
Yeah,
moved
but-
on to 2 different ones. But yeah, those are the 3 main ones.
that's the 3 mains everyone talks about. I can explain in a little more detail. Basically, the Showa era was when the kaiju genre in at least Japan started to
Get big and start really
not
get
big,
going.
it began to crystallize really around its ideas because, grow up effectively. It introduced many of the tropes that are extremely common in the
Series.
not series, the genre period.
You go
Like,
with it.
and it's also introduced many iconic monsters, like I think Mothra, Gamera,
all of the ones that you can think of are from the
all
top
the
of your
ones
head.
you can name off the top of your head were probably introduced in the Showa period.
Yeah, also, most of the Showa films had a much lighter tone than anything else because,
Well, depends really. Like the earlier Showa series had more
no,
heavy
no,
tones.
I
but
don't
as it
mean
went on-
earlier. I don't mean earlier because if you look earlier, then you got stuff like Gojira, which is obviously meant to be taken seriously. But you look
Yeah.
at the later half, or the other outright half, it starts to clearly be aimed for kids at the time, which
Yeah,
which kind of explains why Heisei becomes so, dark and serious for both Gamera and Godzilla, because it's almost like an answer to, that stigmatization that, it's just for kids. Because
What happened is-
both of them seem to be trying to be marketing towards adults at that time.
it's also when because a mainstay of the Showa series is also they were made using they're primarily made using suits, getting guys in rubber suits.
Yeah.
Well, it was still used that even into the Millennium era. what they did instead is that they used more Heisei also
Animatronics.
introduced a bunch of new effects like animatronics or
Outright
oh my God,
CGI, or at least special
outright
effects in
CGI
that
in some
term.
cases. Basically, yeah, which allowed for a lot more intense fight scenes. Like, what else is there about them?
Blood became a lot more common in the
Common.
Millennium
I
era.
mean,
Well,
in the
Millennium
Millennium
Heisei started to use blood more, but even the Showa era had some moments where it introduced that.
Gigan,
Yeah, Gigan's a very
Gigan
easy
especially.
example.
Well, actually, about the suits. Suits are incredibly important within the kaiju sort of fandom, right? You guys constantly are discussing suits and everything.
Yes.
Well, yes,
So-
because they were important to the films at the time.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing that I want to bring up on that, because he starts talking about that as to the history of the genre and why it is formulated like this. And he brings this up. He brings up this Japanese puppet theater, Bunraku. Bunraku, I think. Yeah, where it's puppets that are being performed on stage with the puppeteers in full view of the audience. And sort of he goes on to talk about how this then moves on towards the kaiju genre, where you have this simultaneity, this suspension of disbelief, where you're like, I'm watching Godzilla fight, while at the same time being aware of the man in the suit. As you guys constantly are talking about suit actors and suit quality and looking out for that you have this simultaneous suspension of disbelief that reflects Bunraku, in which so far as you are aware of it both as the monster and as the suit actor. Even going so far, he talks about how the narratives tend to form around sort of Bunraku, casting, essentially, or not casting, but like style, insofar as to do emotions for characters or emotions for monsters, you rely on cutting back to humans, the human audiences to these giant monster fights, where you would cut back, if Gamera or whatever gets punched, it would cut back to
Little
people on
Jimmy.
the street like recoiling in pain, or they would also go on to explain scenarios where it's like, oh, Gamera, he must be Gamera's a good guy, right?
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Oh,
So like it would be a scene where like it's like, oh, Gamera has changed his mind. He's going to fight for humanity. Like where it's this where where, because much like the puppets, the suits cannot, and the monsters themselves cannot express themselves. It relies and falls back on, in this, like in Bunraku, relying back upon the explanations provided by the puppeteers. Now it's being relied on the quote-unquote puppeteers of the human audience members to the fights, where they will then sort of talk and explain thought processes and emotions of these giant monsters.
it's actually interesting.
Well, that's kind of why people tend to consider humans very important to a kaiju movie. I said again, but when you see a kaiju movie nowadays, get complaints. Oh, the human characters are so weak, they're so stupid. I can't stand this, or I don't want them on screen anymore. A part of the reason behind that is because they're essentially needed to actually carry the story, like you said. Back then it was meant to convey the emotion or to progress the plot.
Even if the humans
but
aren't the stars of the show, they're still needed to explain everything around the monsters. Because if you just have like monsters that are completely silent, beating the shit out of each other, then
you don't
there's
have
no
the
substance.
Yeah,
there's
you
no
don't got that.
substance. Like one of them is you see this if you watch the Heisei Gamera trilogy, where
yeah, the humans are great in that movie. In those movies, I would say.
Oh, dude, they're amazing.
Yeah.
or like a lot of Godzilla's like Millennium Collection was also really good.
Most of the Millennium Collection. Now, granted, some of the Millennium Collection goes, a little overboard, but then again, I think it knows that it's going overboard.
That's Final Wars, which is the
Excess in
Palm,
general.
Palm watched that. Oh god.
That is a fun movie. I was about to
It's
say it
fun.
was a good movie, but no, it is a good movie. Fine, I had fun with it.
Yeah,
I'd call
yeah.
it good because
Say-
I had
say it's
fun.
good. Say
Plain
it's
and
good.
simple.
But that movie just—it's an acid trip.
Well,
Bruh,
even then,
it
even
looks like
then,
they
you
had
need the
Godzilla,
humans.
and then they decided, let's just bring in everybody. It's gonna be like the Smash Bros of kaiju movies, and then we're gonna add the Matrix on top of it.
It's like, what do you want? Everything. Yes.
You see, and
How many
that's
monsters do you want in this?
Yes.
All of them.
they really did try to put all of them in the movie. In fact, they had plans for like, I think a few more, but they just couldn't fit them in. Like one of the main reasons you only see Hedora for like 2 seconds is because they didn't have any time to put in his other scenes.
Aww.
Right.
But also, back to the whole Millennium Heisei thing. After the Heisei series, basically made it more what is it?
Serious, a little more grounded, a little more.
Yeah, but also it also changed a lot of them. A lot of people, also wanted it was some kind of a return because to hark back to was it back one of the Millennium series? They kind of fused the Heisei and Showa eras together into one. If I'd say so.
At times they would, but then they would do their own thing, and sometimes they would just lean into Heisei more, which
Yeah, or Showa more.
yeah, which makes Millennium a bit more of the most creative or most diverse, series out of all of them, which, in my opinion, is probably a good thing. But for some people, I understand that it's a little bad because, try not to say but for Gamera and Godzilla, they had very tonally consistent films that followed a strict narrative, strict sort of thing, and all that. While with Millennium Godzilla, it was a different standalone movie. Every single one of them was different.
Some of them were sequels to the other one, but a lot of them were standalones.
Yeah, and some were just sequels to the first, Godzilla movie.
Direct sequels.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
Like
makes making a timeline for the series a chore, from what I hear.
apparently one of the worst one to do a timeline on is the Heisei series because they fucked up the timeline in that one with time travel. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's why I don't really want to say that the Heisei was too serious, or at least with Godzilla, I don't want to say it was too serious, because, like you said, they added shit like time travel.
Sci-fi elements, just that it was
Sci-fi.
structurally speaking its own thing. Not structurally speaking, like genre speaking, it still was its own thing. It just had elements involved.
Exactly, like we were talking about earlier.
What would you say is like the most human out of the kaiju films? At least maybe even out of the Godzilla films between you and historical.
Shin Godzilla.
Shin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
go on.
I was gonna say that because that film, the human characters are the main focus of Shin. Shin is literally he's basically portrayed as just literally a force of nature that can't be stopped. And he moves slowly in the film. He's just a slow boy. Right?
Right.
He just going on a walk, and then the humans shoot him.
Yeah, because they're trying to solve the problem, and the whole point is that, it's supposed to it's just a whole mockery of the Japanese government's response to the Fukushima crisis of 2011.
Which, by the way, is another reason why I kind of like monster movies and kaiju movies, especially because they kind of push a big message most of the time when they're being serious. Like, in the case of Shin, it was very much pushing that Fukushima, serious message that, hey, we need to be better. We're not doing the things that we need to do. And when something like this happens again, who knows how bad it can get. That was basically the message of the movie. And, it hit that with a home run, and I loved it.
I mean, the biggest thing about the whole Fukushima crisis is one of the worst nuclear disasters Japan had since the end of World War II, because we all know what happened there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you could leverage that into like being, this could be a thing that happens again. That could have been our third bomb, Damn it, Kai, you got me saying it now.
Yeah. It's very difficult to not say trust me.
But anyway.
Oh, trust me, I know.
We
Aww.
know. We know.
Who else but Crossstar?
Russ, what has been your favorite message from a monster movie?
From a monster movie, are we gonna? Would you count? Hmm.
Go ahead.
Let me think about this for a bit. My
'Cause
favorite.
I know you had another question there. You're like, what? Like, were you gonna ask if something counts as a monster, or?
Yeah. I was okay. Well, I don't know if it's very much my favorite message, but when it comes to monster movies, I think one of my favorite in terms of messages has to be, and if you'll count this, Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
That's a good movie. That's a good movie.
Now I
What's
mean the
that?
1956 version of the film.
Oh.
I have
Yeah,
not
tell us
seen.
about it.
I've not seen the 1978 version. Yeah, I'm there. So essentially, the thing that I like a lot about it is because of how multi-textual it is in terms of analysis. Where a lot of the big things when people watch this film is they go, "Oh, well, this is a film that's supposed to be about the fears of communism because it is, everyone comes in, everyone gets the same, they all think on each other and everything." But the film itself is actually incredibly vague, and so you can do multiple readings. In fact, you can do counter readings of the film. For example, on that with the communism, of course, it's pretty easy to do and make sense, especially during this period of the Red Scare, where it's like, well, what's the fear? Oh, we all become the same thinking mass after we get converted by the invading force. The invading force is communism. The conversion is, becoming a communist. And what do they all do then? Well, they all think as one big collective. But at the same time, the film, since it's so vague, can end up being read as a story on McCarthyism. Because that was also another big thing with McCarthyism during that period of time, where it kind of comes down to the same thing. Like it is about becoming this one thinking mass. What are you all doing? You're all American. What are you all doing? You're looking out for the communist. What are you all doing? You're one big collective, and that collective is the citizenry of the United States. And under McCarthyism, that meant there was one way of thinking, one way of approaching, one way to move together. It was this huge unity under that sort of general McCarthyism.
If you don't mind me saying this, I didn't watch the 60 version. I watched the remake, but I can kind of see that in the remake too, still, because, one of the main things that the body snatchers do when they see someone who isn't, one of them, and I don't know if they do this in the original, so that's why I'm just mentioning this, that one of the first things that they do is they immediately point and they start to scream, which kind of hints more towards what you're saying with the McCarthyism, how people were probably very quick to just immediately point to someone and say, "You're a fucking commie."
Well, yeah, because that's how you get in. That's how you show that you're a great American. You, even if you don't really have anything, as long as you point out somebody and say they're a communist, you're good. You're doing God's work, essentially, is what that meant during that period of time. And even then, with that, there's even one other reading of the film which was quite interesting, where it was actually about liberation, specifically just because at one scene, he goes in for this kiss, right? On this, and it's quite liberal at some points with the film, because these two main characters, the two main characters are, and they struggle to keep it this way. The two main characters are divorcees. Both of them are divorced already. That's a huge no-no. Divorce.
Yeah, it's a taboo.
Then on top of that, they start to see each other. So it's two divorcees who start seeing each other, and then they have sex. You don't see it, of course, because it's that classic fate whatever. But the next morning, she's in the kitchen making him breakfast, and he's coming down yawning and stretching, being like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she's like, eggs and bacon and shit. Like it's the post-coital marital bliss, where like that was big for that film to do during that period. But then later on in the film, when she does get converted, he says this specific line when he kisses her. He says, "I didn't know fear until I kissed her on the lips." Because he kisses her, and she doesn't have any emotion back. She does not care for him because she's been converted. And then that's been sort of read as the masculine fear of the liberated woman, because before she was under sort of his kind of subservience, cooking, cleaning, that marital bliss kind of thing. Whereas now when she doesn't have any feelings for him and doesn't have to have any feelings for him, all of a sudden now she's terrifying. She's a monster because she is no longer dependent on the affection of a man. Which was interesting to read about that kind of interpretation of that scene.
That is a very interesting take on the movie, especially with the mindset that people must have had back then. I mean, especially back then, if anything. I don't quite have that much more to add to it, but I actually really do like that take, I will say. I'm trying to think of other monster movies that kind of have similar sort of takes on the story, or at least, they go about certain things to make you come up with different meanings or, different methods of thinking about them. I can obviously think of a few that try to have deeper, meanings that you can find in them, like Alien, of course. That one's kind of obvious.
It's obvious, but why don't we dive into it? So,
Yeah,
explain it to us, Kai.
Well, one of the more popular, takes on that movie is that the movie is essentially about rape, and that the alien, it's very obvious. A bunch of other people have talked about it, but the alien essentially sexually assaults all of the crew members. It takes them away. The very first thing that it does is it latches onto someone's face, forces something down their throat, and impregnates them. And, everything about the alien, H.R. Geiger talked about it, all that. It's inherently sexual. And it's sort of this odd mixture of feminine yet very masculine with its head, and, its body still looks thin, almost lanky, but it has very oddly pronounced hips.
Its method of killing is penetration with a second, smaller mouth that literally just kind of looks like a penis in its mouth.
Yeah, and it tends to aim for the head, especially, so you can obviously say, oh, it's like a tongue being forced down your throat. There's a lot of different things that you can take from that, and especially with the original plan that they had, which was, oh, it's going to use all of the other crew members to make eggs, which, again, kind of leans into that sort of method of thinking and that sort of, secret meaning of the movie, but obviously they didn't go with that. They went for something more ambiguous with it. It's just killing them. And
yeah.
They took it into a more sci-fi approach in the sequel, and now in Prometheus they're going for a religious sort of take on it, which
we don't talk about that.
Yeah, we don't. Nah, Prometheus doesn't exist.
It could be done better. It could be done so much better.
And of course,
people know how to run from things in Prometheus. Totally,
Yeah.
the giant ring chasing me, straight line.
Straight
and of
fucking
course,
line.
one thing that we kind of have to bring up, or at the very minimum should bring up, with in terms of the psychosexual imagery of, the alien, of the xenomorph, is the fact that H.R. Giger, as it's pronounced, because my mom will not let that rest.
Right.
Because H.R. Giger's Swiss, and so my mom's Swiss, and so she fucking,
right.
It's like, pronounce it right. This is like one of our most famous Swiss people ever. Please, for the love of God, get it right. So H.R. Giger, those were his. To call them wet dreams would be strange because they were more like wet nightmares. But these were his sexual. This was sexual imagery from him. This kind of is the stuff that got him off a little bit. I don't want to be. I can't really phrase it in any less a crude way, but this is the stuff he found hot. because he did have this, he had constant nightmares. The man was deeply disturbed. I'm pretty sure his final words on this earth before he died were something along the lines of, "If I hope there isn't an afterlife because I don't want to go through this again."
Oh my god.
Oh, poor
The
fucking
man,
guy.
the man, huh? How did he die?
No, I said poor guy.
Yeah, no, that guy, he had issues, man. He had issues. So there's really no way you can avoid talking about psychosexual imagery when you're talking about the xenomorph, because the guy who designed it purposefully laded it with tons and tons of psychosexual imagery, because that's what his basis was for the creation of it. It was like all this, it was hot to him. That's why you have these extremely sleek, feminine form that's also then laden with more, as Freud would put it, more phallic imagery on it, like the head and the smaller mouth and the tail and everything, and its method of killing, its method of procreation, which is a huge other step over of destroying boundaries of set biological gender boundaries or sex boundaries, where it can get the male pregnant. You as a guy can get impregnated, and that's pretty fucked.
Also, upon that note, I can't help but think of how it, actually gives birth, I guess is the best term that I can use, in that, when it leaves the host, it bursts out. There's blood everywhere. There's pain. People are shocked. People are horrified. Which, considering H.R. Giger, I think I said it right, and
Yeah.
what you said about him, I can't help but think, what is he trying to think about? What is going through his mind when it comes to childbirth? Is this how he views it? Is this how he feels about it? Or is this just a circumstance of everything else with the monster,
Well, we can't go too far into say what H.R. Giger necessarily wanted that to mean, because while he was, of course, the designer of the monster, we can't say for certain how far his influence was on the film in terms of other methods that they came up with it. For
Right.
example, the scene with the chest burster and all that, because we still have to understand that this film, it wasn't just H.R. Giger's, movie. This was still filmed by Ridley Scott. This still had, other writers, editors, cinematographers, it's very much a collective kind of experience.
Well, I still wonder if he had some sort of say in it, or
He
some sort of
probably
process
did.
in it.
He probably did, but we can't go so far as to sell it on this must mean this. It's about you can argue certainly about the pregnancy angle, but not necessarily that it's H.R. Geiger's approach with pregnancy or his views on pregnancy.
It could.
Right,
it
that's
could
kind of a lot of
simply match-
assuming, so.
Yeah. It could simply just match everything else that's going with it. But honestly, there's a lot of reasons why that movie still fucking gives me the creeps.
Ugh.
It was so well made, by the way. Like, one of my favorite, the chest burster scene. I'm sorry, I've been dying to say this entire time, but
Knock yourself out.
the reactions to that scene,
They're real.
they're all genuine, right?
They're
Yeah,
real.
because the director didn't say a fucking word to any of the actors involved.
Well,
None of them.
except the guy who was
Well,
you know.
yeah.
Well, that's
getting his
different.
chest bursted.
But point still stands. Every single the look of genuine horror on everyone's face. That's authentic. That's something you don't get to see anymore.
Didn't they do the same thing in The Thing?
I think so.
With one of the scenes,
Like,
I think.
Because
Yeah.
back what was that? That was 80s, I believe.
Yeah.
Directors still had a lot of fun with their casts, and I would say fun is very maybe not the proper term,
Not fun for
but
the actors.
not fun for the actors. There we go. But that's, I think, one of the magics of practical effects as a whole, like being able to have that type of effect on people rather than let's imagine Alien was made in 2020 you know it'd be done with CG, and you know you couldn't recreate that magic.
You couldn't
Like
do it.
there's no way. Like it's weird as a whole that the actors have this issue of not being able to properly react to the CGI things that are put up. I mean, like I've seen some pretty horrible like motion caps that are supposed to like they're supposed to signify what the monster is. You're supposed to like see exactly how it's approaching the actor, and they're still supposed to give an authentic experience, which I mean I know that is like a facet of acting, but there's a difference between acting towards a mocap versus acting towards something you're genuinely having an experience towards.
Yeah, which is a bit off topic, but somewhat on topic. It's one of the reasons why I do give Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom some credit, because they used animatronics in that movie that the actors could interact with, which, at least to me, gave for better performances in that movie, because how many of you guys have seen the film? I think Historical has, and I think Cross has, but I don't know if Palm has.
Oh, which one again?
Fallen Kingdom.
I have not seen Fallen Kingdom.
That's the sequel to the newest Jurassic World ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've only seen the first Jurassic World.
I'd give it a try, at least for the later half, in terms of the special effects and the dinosaurs. Maybe not for the story, because, I'm not going to defend it there. I'm not going to defend it there. But
But
the animatronics that they used in that movie gave for really good interactions with the actors. Like, there's a scene that they showed off in the trailer, so it's not really spoilers, but two of the main actors are interacting with the T-Rex that's dated, and they actually had the animatronic move. They had it, do certain things that the actors had to deal with. They had to climb over it. They had to be careful as to not wake it up. There was a more genuine sort of feel behind it that you were talking about. And when you do stuff like that, I think it actually kind of immerses the audience really well too, because, if the actor looks legitimately afraid of something, you're usually a bit more afraid too, I have to say.
100%, because like it doesn't. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just a thing when it comes to humans viewing humans, but you can sense a bit of genuineness in a way someone like acts towards something, and there's not. Of course, you can edit and you can change angles and you can do a whole bunch of like extra special effects to make it look as real as possible. But if you're not feeling it and you don't think they're feeling it either, you won't be convinced. Plain and simple. Like it takes you a step away from immersion, even if you're still having fun watching it, per se.
I mean, it's part of the reason why I like the It remakes, because most of the actors flat out said, "Oh yeah, Pennywise is fucking creepy," which
They
gave
probably
this.
grew up with clown
Yeah,
phobias.
yeah, and when he's interacting, trying trying so hard not to say it.
Say what?
Whenever he's interacting with the actors in that movie, you can usually tell that they're at least somewhat unsettled by his appearance at most, or at least, which really helps sell that he's creepy.
Oh, I was gonna say too. They've like absolutely nailed his appearance in the remakes. Like, just. I mean, I was already scared of it originally. That's what gave me a clown phobia. But then I saw him in the remake, and I was like, wow, he just looks super fucked. No, I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Is it weird that I think the Tim Curry one is a bit more unsettling?
Is it because it's more innocent looking?
Yeah, actually, and I think with the idea that he's luring in children makes him especially more unsettling, because the remake Pennywise, that's more terrifying. That is more legitimately creepy to look at. But the Tim Curry one, that looks like it could lure in a kid, and that's what bothers me.
Right. You like the fact that it's convincing. It's something that you would just see at that point in time, like versus something like overtly scary, overtly like it's a problem as soon as you see it.
Yeah, I think the scariest parts of the remake was when he was talking calmly and almost seemed friendly, like the Billy scene. Sure, he was pretty damn
Mhm.
creepy in that scene, and I still think the Tim Curry one kind of demonstrates my opinion a bit better. But the parts where he did seem legitimately friendly unsettled me the most because you could tell exactly what he was doing, but the kid didn't.
Right, right.
And
Ugh.
when you're making a monster such as a clown, which one of the main reasons why some people are afraid of clowns is because it's covering up their true intentions. You don't actually see what the face that they're making is, because it could be shaped like a smile, but they could be fucking pissed off at you and you couldn't tell. And that's the thing about clowns. If you were to lure in a kid, use a clown.
Man,
Ugh.
you're giving me Wayne Gacy flashback.
Yeah.
Wayne Gacy.
Yeah, anytime you talk about clowns, you always and how creepy they are. It's the conversation's eventually going to go back to John Wayne Gacy, Gracie, John Wayne, whatever his name was.
John
It'll
Gacy,
always
Wayne
Gacy.
happen
Gravy.
every time. John Wayne. John
Which
Wayne is half cousin stepson to annihilate the 2.5 octave decillion alien scum of the universe.
Talk about a real monster, am I right, guys? Haha, that was too real. I'm sorry.
too real. Fun fact, before we move off of it real quick. Apparently he exists in the same universe as Rosemary's Baby. I believe that's what I've I
Most
read
of
that somewhere, like, what was it, like 4 years back? I think it was like an article or like in a magazine. Kaiji, you said what were you saying?
most of Stephen King's novels are actually in the same universe, if we're being technical
Is
here.
Rosemary's Baby also by Stephen King?
I don't know if it is, but I know that he makes most of their works connected. Because
Hold on, we have the technology.
it's not The Lone
No,
Ranger, The
no.
Lone Wanderer.
The movie Rosemary's Baby is based on the book Rosemary's Baby, but that's by Ira Marvin Levin.
Did they know Stephen King though? Because I know he has an entire series that basically says that they're all in the same universe.
Stephen King described him as the Swiss watchmaker of suspense novels.
Hmm?
Who claimed that it was like that though? Like they were in the same universe? Like, was it Stephen King or the guy who did Rosemary's Baby?
I think it was King himself. There's supposed to be like some type of like scene within Rosemary's Baby itself that it's supposed to either be referencing it, or they're supposed to be looking or talking about an article about killings going on in the town.
Hmm.
I'll actually have to find that because I need to verify my own statement there. But
If you can't verify your own statement, Palm, we're gonna hold you accountable, and you're gonna go off the podcast in a brutal manner. We're gonna do what he did to Billy.
you want to talk about brutal manner, man? All right, why don't you take me to some poltergeist movie? Why don't you have me look in the mirror and rip my face off?
I didn't watch Poltergeist.
What? You didn't watch Poltergeist?
I never watched
I never watched it.
Poltergeist. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's all
The,
good, man. It's all good, man.
Another one of my favorites, though. Speaking of the geists and spirits and shit, was it the Exorcist film? You know
Exorcist is pretty good.
I also haven't seen that movie.
Listen, all I'm gonna say is power of Christ compels you.
Your
Yeah,
mother
it's
sucks
the
cocks
original
in hell.
crab walking scene. Like that scene's iconic, and like a lot of that imagery, I mean, you see it in modern horror. Like I don't want to say it like it
Imagery.
bites The Exorcist, but like it became a staple for a reason.
Yeah, it's because the idea of a demonic possession is inherently terrifying.
I think it also helps that it's a little girl, which kind of leads back in from the Pennywise sort of thing. It's supposed to be an inherently innocent sort of thing, something that's inherently positive, being corrupted and being fucked up.
I mean, the whole point is that well, yeah, exactly. Something that's inherently innocent, right? Something you would never think that would be a monster. Becoming a monster is on a human level, on like a deeply instinctual level, it's disturbing to us because what do you see when you see a child. Well, in the case of Oliver, he would probably break its head in two, but
Yeah, he'd probably do a
Inside joke, Ben.
Mortal Kombat fatality.
Mortal Kombat fatality on it. Yeah, but in the case of most people, they probably just try and protect the child because it's a fucking crying child.
Instinctual,
Yeah. Then its head does a 180 turn, and you hear bones snapping, and you're like, what the fuck?
And then it smiles at you and says that your mother is a whore.
Yep. Who sucks cocks in hell?
Yep.
Harris.
And then he just keeps saying the power of Christ compels you until it stops.
And then you get Hulk Hogan spray paint a cross onto his chest and have him do the almighty leg drop onto the demon.
If that's how it ended, I would have watched it.
Oh, dude, I would have
would've
watched the movie if that's how it would have ended. If every monster or horror movie ended with Hulk Hogan leg dropping the bad guy, I would watch them.
Bro, whether it's Pinhead, Pyramid Head, Wishmaster, anyone in between, Hulk Hogan's there at the very end. Candyman, more like Candy Bitch. Take my leg drop.
Take my leg drop.
One thing I do want to bring up, that if we're going to talk about horror, and we're going to talk about that whole spiel,
we're talking monsters and horror. Monsters
and horror. But if we do want to talk about monsters and horror, because those are very closely intimately connected things, I would want to bring up probably one of the most influential horror critics and academics, Robin Wood. And Robin Wood is an interesting person. Like, just on a personal level, that man is interesting because he was, during his active period, this would have been 50s, 60s, 70s, a little bit in the 80s, I think. He was after a certain point, he was an openly homosexual Marxist socialist.
What
the fuck?
Who fucking basically constantly said, when analyzing his films or whatever, was like, look at how the fucking government keeps trying to keep us down, and look at how we as a society try to keep ourselves down. So this guy was
It honestly sounds like a
fooling.
fucking... This sounds like it was a fucking Gamers Rise Up meme.
If you wanted I don't think you could get... He was also fucking, if I'm remembering his face correctly, he was also a minority member. Like, I'm pretty sure that man, Robin Wood, was like, let me double check where he's from, but ethnically, I think he might have been possibly
This guy sounds fucking
he wasn't,
hilarious.
he wasn't Canada. No, I think he was no, he was no, he's a white guy. He's English, I think.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. But like you could not get more like fuck the system, fuck the man than Robin Wood during that period. So he's just nutty.
Sounds like a fun guy.
He was an Englishman too. Oh God.
Palm, you meant that, so you got Tommyknockers confused with Rosemary's Baby.
I don't know why I was thinking Rosemary's Baby, but yeah, I cleared it up just to say that it was he was referenced. They say Pennywise lives in Tommyknockers, and then he's referenced in Dreamcatcher as well. But
right.
I didn't want to interrupt you. I just want to drop it in there.
No, that's fine. So Robin Wood comes up with this concept of, I think he takes some of it probably from psychologists, this concept of repression. Now, something to keep in note very distinctly is that repression and oppression sound very similar. They are not the same within this critical context. Oppression is a lot easier to become aware of because you can become conscious of it very easily because something external keeps you oppressed. When you are, if you're gay and everyone's straight and they all say it's wrong to be gay, that's external. That's a bunch of other people keeping you oppressed. Whereas repression is difficult to spot and also entirely internal. That is not to say it's not affected by external sources like the society around you, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, it is not the enforcement of it's not being enforced by society at large actively with other agents keeping them down. It is within your own self that you keep these agents down. Like one can be, like in the case of the homosexual one, you can be both oppressed and repressed, because this leads to tons of people denying their homosexuality, claiming they're not or whatever. And then only like 30 years later down the line, when they've had a wife and 2 kids, they realize do they feel like, yeah, no, I'm gay. Like I'm tons
gay.
of people denying their homosexuality, claiming they're not. So he comes up with these 2 concepts of repression. He calls them basic repression and surplus repression. Basic repression is a universal trait, pretty much, because it's the only way we operate as a society. It's foundational to us functioning, and it's necessary. Basic repression is a necessary thing. This would be things like, don't eat your neighbor. If you want something, don't steal it. Don't go around throwing haymakers at random passerbys. Because if you've got these urges for these kind of things, or these basic repression urges, like if you're hungry, you don't go out. Yeah, like I said, you don't go out eating other people, or you don't go stealing other people's food. That's how you function as a society. That's basic repression. That's necessary for us to work. Surplus repression, that is where we start getting into the cultural aspects, into those very culturally specific things, because they change over time and they change over place. But that's where things start being, it's called surplus because it's not necessary to operate as a society. This, again, as it often falls back on for him, onto things like sexuality. You have to be straight. You have to be monogamous. You have to be certain this and this way. Where it's not, you don't necessarily, like, society doesn't collapse if we accept that some people don't use monogamous relationships and are instead in a open relationship. I forget what the other word is, hegemonous or whatever relationship instead of monogamous. Society doesn't collapse immediately upon it. Whereas, if we are like, yeah, you can start eating people if you want, that's when society starts to collapse. So what ends up happening is that he comes up with these because the monsters within films start representing these repressions. For example, zombies. Zombies are a pretty basic one to understand. They represent the loss of the basic repression. They eat people. They don't see the future. They don't have delayed gratification. They just live for the very moment and go around eating people. If we want to talk about more surplus repression, the original Dracula. What was he? He was the sexy, mysterious foreigner coming into your lands, taking your women away from you. Surplus repression of the foreigner.
Cross.
Yes.
Just to point one thing out, that's more the modern Dracula. The older Dracula, very, very hideous man.
No, I'm referring to the Dracula. Okay, I'm referring to, when I mean older Dracula, I mean the Dracula of
Bram Stoker.
Of Bram Stoker. I mean the Dracula played by Bela Lugosi.
Even then, Bram Stoker's Dracula wasn't the.
I mean Bela Lugosi's Dracula.
Oh, I'm kind of yeah, that makes sense.
Don't say that.
You might also be thinking of, when you say ugly, you might be thinking of Nosferatu if we're talking film.
The other one.
Love that one.
There's also other ones that weren't exactly the most visually appealing.
No, but like what I mean when I say Dracula, which, interesting enough, that movie is not based on the novel by Bram Stoker's Dracula. That movie is based on a stage play that was based on the book. So that's kind of wild in a little bit there. But yeah, so that was the point. Like, if we're talking Bram Stoker's Dracula with Bela Lugosi, which people were fawning over Bela Lugosi when he came on stage. You know for a fact that there were people being like, yeah, holy shit. The accent, the mannerisms, the looks, all that jazz. All of it. So that then plays into that, and then if we want to talk a bit more, I'll leave it off at that actually, so that you guys can sort of start talking about that as opposed to me going on and on about the figure of the other and the figure of repression and basic repression and surplus repression.
Honestly, there's a reason why we picked this topic, Cross. It's because I knew you would have a field day. But
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I was just intrigued. Like,
yeah,
don't feel bad about going on and on. Like, that's all really interesting. Keep going, dude.
I do the same to the palm every day. You don't have to.
Okay.
That reminds me, we gotta have a Warhammer 40k podcast.
We are.
I'll harken back to the stream or the bit in the stream where we were talking about children, whereas we have a lot of the other becoming where a lot of the films, horror films of the older periods, this would have been films judging usually from about the 40s to maybe the 60s. The other is the monstrous. The monstrous is the foreigner, the thing coming in, whether it's a vampire from outer space or whatever. It is about something external entering the society. But we get a kind of a shift in the 70s, especially with films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where what was originally the purpose of horror in some aspects was to reinforce, these things like the nuclear family. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Whereas it's the nuclear family of protecting it. Like even in films like, oh God, I'm so terrible with names. I literally just spoke about it. The one Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's an external force. You've got to protect your family. You've got to protect your fellow countrymen. It's all that coming in. Whereas then with that, there's the transformation. With films like The Omen and films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the locus for the monster becomes not the outside external, but the internal. It's the family. In the case of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's a family of cannibals. It's still a family because you have, like, for example, the figure of Leatherface, who's constantly wearing different masks as the film goes on, representing different parts of the family. At one point, he wears like a woman's mask, a mother's mask, and everything.
Used in one of the films.
And then The Omen, of course, and like you said, like with films like The Exorcist, it is about the child, being turned, being changed. This is the child is the issue.
I always preferred those sort of horror movies, and it's something that Texas Chainsaw Massacre did for me. Now, even though it's not exactly monster, related, but just something that it did that was different from most other horror movies was most of the really bad scenes didn't take place at night. Like the first kill of the movie, the first, two big bad events of the movie took place in broad daylight. And I think
Of which film?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, that's very true.
And I think having something so horrible take place in the daylight sort of removes that basic security that, oh, it's daylight, it's safe. Because that's like an instinctual thing.
Yeah, that even happens if you see it with, older films such as Cat People and Dracula, even Frankenstein. The monster only comes out at night, whereas, as you've pointed out, with things like The Omen, even The Exorcist to a certain extent, but definitely a lot of its more nastier scenes are taking place during the night. But definitely with Chainsaw Massacre, the terror is all the time. It doesn't matter that it's, the middle of the day, broad daylight out. you're still out. It's still coming for you, and it's still gonna get you. You don't have that blanket safety of nighttime is the bad time, where I just stay inside.
I mean, another example, a bit more on the topic of today, but still on to the one that we're on, is probably one of my favorite monster movies. It's a Korean film. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but you should.
I probably have.
You probably have, but I don't know if the others have. It's called The Host.
Yep, Bong Joon-ho, the host.
Yep.
Never heard of that.
First time you ever see the monster in this movie is in broad daylight. There's a lot of people around, bright as day. It's a very innocent moment. And the first time you see this grotesque, horrific looking monster is during this time. And you see it just cause so much horrific carnage. It is brutal, it is horrifying. But again, it's taking place during the day and you get a clear look at it somehow. But at the same time, it doesn't stop you from feeling a sense of unease and almost a sense of terror when looking at this stuff happening because, one, it's somewhat of an invasion of, safety, it's somewhat an invasion of privacy almost, I want to say, but maybe not quite. But still, you get that feeling, and, it just comes to show that, the people who were working on that monster, especially, who made it so unsettling to look at, made it so, if it's in the dark, it's creepy as shit to look at, but if it's in the daylight, it's still somehow unsettling to look at.
Well, because it's a mutant. It's a whole entanglement of a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah, you see, it's really just like a master of creature design, too, because you can somewhat tell what it is, but you can't at the same time. You can get guesses, but you really can't figure it out.
It's the type of thing where even if you see it during the day, it may actually be worse that you can see the details. You can see all of the horrific features of it because it's in broad daylight versus like being covered in the veil of night,
Yeah, because, if it was just a simple, smooth design that was meant to look creepy in the dark, then it wouldn't be that big. But the fact that you can see so much of it and you can kind of guess what's in it makes you so sickened. And throughout the movie, or later on in the movie, it reveals even more, but it doesn't tell you what it is still. And once you learn more of what's on it or what's in it, it doesn't make it less scary. It ends up making you feel more disgusted with it. It gives you a really good sense of repulsion, if anything. Which,
Right. The something like this is just like so revolting, but it just is such a it's such a disconnect from what humanity should be that you're just it's something that shouldn't exist.
Well,
Something that-
yeah.
Well, in the host, it's not a human that gets mutated; it's a fish.
Oh, it's a fish.
It's
Gotcha.
Because
it's implied to be a fish anyway.
It's implied to be from its visuals and the fact that it comes out of a river which has been tainted by a ton of toxic chemicals. Because like 5 years prior to that incident, the movie starts like 5 years before this part of the movie happens. Oh.
But yeah.
There we go. It starts with them in some kind of science laboratory. I think maybe it's like an American base in South Korea.
It was a real incident, by the way. So
yeah, it was based on a real incident where I don't know if it was an American base or something. All I know is that it was a laboratory that was dumping chemicals into the river illegally, which was a huge scandal and everything. And the start of the movie, it is I believe, an American guy. At the very minimum, it's a white dude who speaks English. So God knows if that was American.
It was based off of an American personnel.
Yeah, who basically is like, get rid of those chemicals. And he's like, oh, well, we have to go through this whole process. And he's like, no. And he's like, just dump it down the drain. He's like, we can't do it. He's like, just do it. And so like he forces this like a tiny Korean guy to do it or whatever. Again, like as he's saying, based on this incident.
And just that touch of realism makes it just that much more unsettling to me. Because you can look at this thing, you can look at what this creature does, but you have to also think of it as, oh, this is all a person's fault.
I mean, I actually have a different view because you may think, oh, a person created that might be horrifying. You know what? The type of monster really terrifies the shit out of me.
What?
What?
He's also one of my favorite monsters. It's also one of my personal favorite of all monster creature designs. It's H.P. Lovecraft.
Mm.
Lovecraftian horrors.
Kind of
It's
like Alien. Kind of like Alien in some way.
Kind of like Alien, but here's the thing about
It's-
Lovecraft's novels, besides being obscenely racist.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Well, what
Never
are you
forget,
talking
don't
about?
forget
That
the
makes it
racism
better.
in the.
That makes it better. What are you talking about?
Here's the best part. I want to say this one thing because I had this described perfectly to me by a friend who is still black, where he went, this is what his words were, I don't think H.P. Lovecraft was a racist. And I was like, why do you think that? And he says, because he was so terrified of everything, I don't think he fully understood what race was. He just knew it was different and that scared him enough. And he's right. The dude
That is
because
H.P. Lovecraft's
H.P.
basically his
Lovecraft was
worldview.
H.P. Lovecraft created an entire horror story because like air conditioning got invented.
The guy was a paranoid
A
nutcase.
guy above him in his apartment used air conditioning, and H.P. Lovecraft was like, "Why would anyone need air conditioning? Who needs to be cold all the time? What kind of sick freak is living above me?" The man was terrified of anything. And another point to him not fully understanding what he was doing, he was married to a Jewish woman, and he took her to anti-Semitic rallies.
Oh,
Like, not even like to point at his wife and be like, she's the monster or whatever. He would just take her there because he was like, I should spend some time with my wife.
No, you know what he also hated, by the way, other people? He hated Southerners,
The poor.
the poor. No, there's a part in the story where where there's an entire, Cthulhu cultists. He describes them as this. They're all Native American, black, and Asian. Not a single, or a woman. Not a single white man is there.
The only time he doesn't like white people is when they are poor.
Yeah.
If you're a poor white person, he's scared of you. Not so much if you're a poor black man, but like definitely like.
Oh, another thing to know about H.P. Lovecraft. He didn't even like Americans that much.
Yeah.
No, because they were sort of in that general thing of like being the poor and uneducated because they broke off from the monarchy.
H.P. Lovecraft actually one time wrote an entire thesis stating why Britain was the best nation in the world. And another thing to know about his writing, despite being from America, he wrote in British English.
Mm-hmm.
That's why color is spelled like, the proper way instead of the American way.
Shut up, Brady.
proper way.
Yeah, it is the proper way.
You want a real horror novel? Listen to British people talk.
British people going to hell for being British.
Exactly.
But it's extremely interesting because a lot of the things he was terrified of would later be put into, like, one of his biggest fears was, even though he lived close to the ocean, he was absolutely terrified of the ocean. Which,
for good reason.
explains...
For good reason.
Yeah.
Shit's
And
terrifying.
Not only that, but he's also scared of animals. He was deathly afraid of them.
Like, there is little to nothing that he wasn't deathly afraid of.
Rich Englishman was something he wasn't afraid of. Because he was a rich Englishman, basically.
Well, he knew what that was. And, there's a reason why, Lovecraftian horror is often referred to as the fear of the unknown, because it seems like a lot of the stuff that he was afraid of, he just didn't know what it was.
And that's kind of the point where it was like, as he was going to describe with the alien kind of harkens to, it's the fear of that which is incomprehensible. The fear that something out there is so beyond us that to even look at it is difficult.
Which
it seems like some of the best horror writers or some of the people that come up with the scariest things just happen to be people who are terrified themselves. Like, Geiger, he was clearly terrified of a lot of shit, or Giger, as I should say. I'm really trying here. And Lovecraft, obviously, he was terrified of so many goddamn things.
Listen, I can't get over it. He one time wrote an entire book dedicated to bashing what is it? Oh yeah, Fishermen. He was terrified of fishermen.
Because they went out into the ocean, and the
Yeah, and
ocean's terrifying.
He's like, oh, the fishermen are actually fucking, they worship cultists.
No, they're actually fishmen.
That's actually a thing. They're
Yeah, I
actually
know.
fish.
That was an actual story, and I loved it. I
Yeah,
loved that one.
Shadow over Innsmouth, which is just a fishing town, which was fucked up because it was a fishing town, which means that they were heavily involved with the despots known as the fish.
Which means that they were fish.
They were fishy.
After all, how could you be comfortable going out into the ocean if you yourself not part fish?
I mean, he also, if I recall correctly, one of the only one of the other things is that there was a Norwegian sailor who was only a good guy because he was rich and white.
Yeah, that's the thing. You could have a character who is an absolute asshole, but as long as he's rich and white, or at the very minimum, not poor and white, he's gonna be the best guy. Lovecraft would be like, this guy is so good. He's perfect.
That's what he is.
It doesn't matter that he, fucking hit his wife, pushed her down a set of stairs, and has never so much as looked at his child.
He's rich.
It's a dude. He's white. He's Gucci.
That's still funny. But here's the thing: is that
picturing Lovecraft saying Gucci now, and I hate that.
But it's also like a bunch of other classic horror novels. Now that we got into topics of older ones, because you have a lot of those like more heavy themes in more classical horror novels than by heavy themes is you get to see more of the, how do I put this? That's difficult. Damn, I can't really describe it then. Oof.
Oh, dude, that's a big oof moment.
I was more or less going to describe you see a transition to more the from the more pompous aristocrat to the more poor guy, being the horror victim in more modern horror than anything. Goes from, the guy who's actually in power to the guy who wasn't, because it's also when, rich people read more books than anything.
It goes from the rich man being in trouble to a common man.
Yeah. Struggling effectively, because if you go not just H.P. Lovecraft, before H.P. Lovecraft, if you've read the actual original Dracula novel before,
yeah, the guy's rich.
No, that's not just Dracula. The people he kills are English aristocrats.
Yeah, they're rich.
And an American aristocrat who just has a complete Texan accent, which is funny.
I will be right back. I need to go to the bathroom.
What a nerd.
Oh, nerd.
Oh, what a big fat fucking nerd.
I mean, another one is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde as well.
A rich man turns into a monster.
It not turns into a monster. Okay, understand Jekyll and Hyde. The whole thing is that Hyde is sort of the embodiment
person.
of he's basically he's just Jekyll's repressed inner self, who is a violent man who has sex all the time, basically, right? A thug. Meanwhile, there's the good Dr. Jekyll, who's a nice, good man who is quite friendly with people. Right?
Yeah.
The whole point is that he can basically get away with anything he wants by basically having, they're the same person, they're just alter egos, effectively. And he's able to get away with it.
And that's why, because
that's why he kills himself in the end. He blows his brains out.
Man, I'm an asshole.
It's not that he figured out he was an asshole, it's that he couldn't transform back into Dr. Jekyll because he was stuck as Hyde, and he's like, well, the police are now after me. There's no other way to go. And blew his brains out.
Yeah, yeet.
That's
why couldn't he transform back?
He ran out of his he basically had to use a magic potion to transform between them, and he ran out of the shit.
Oh,
he's like,
okay.
Fuck him out. What happened is that later on in the novel, he began transforming into Mr. Hyde, basically at random. which is terrifying to him because he wanted to get away squeaky with his crimes. And so he's like, well, shit, now I'm gonna know as a criminal. And then he needs the potion to transform back into Dr. Jekyll, but it keeps warping in and out between the two at random. And then eventually he runs out of it, meaning he's just stuck as Mr. Hyde, just sitting down in his chair, not knowing what to do, locked up in his lab. So he just decides to end it all by blowing his brains out. He's by far also the best character in the whole novel, because the other main characters are about as interesting as a slice of bread.
I mean, it seems like it's more about the idea of, the plot.
Yeah.
What if you could turn into your deepest, darkest desires at a whim? That seems more akin to what it's trying to be about, instead of, well, this is about Mr. Hyde and his long, intense journey with his friends, and then they all figure it out in the end because they're friends. It's not about that.
No, it's about indulging in one's inner self in exchange instead of hiding it all up, right?
Yeah. Even if
The
your
end,
inner self is a piece of
fuck.
of shit.
There's a scene in the novel where he literally tramples over a woman, like a teenage girl. Hyde tramples over her because who the fuck can stop him?
I mean, who hasn't done that before?
There's also what else is there?
No comment.
No, who else has not done that before? One of the most surprising ones is the story of the mummy actually was more of a recent 1920s invention than anything, because the mythos. Because even
Mhm.
though ancient Egypt became popular in the 19th century among aristocrats, because they bought literally what they would do is they would steal shit from Egypt and put it in their mansions. Be like, yes, Egyptian, because they're rich fucking assholes.
I mean, yeah. What else do you expect from British people?
British woman, not just British, the French, the Germans,
What
Italians,
else?
even the
What else?
Americans.
What else would you expect from the French?
But what happened is that they did an expedition once, which a lot of them died under mysterious circumstances, which became more of a myth, which spawned the whole, the scary mummy shit. Was it a Hollywood invention?
It was a Hollywood invention, Universal.
You just lagged out, so keep going, Kai.
It was
Discord.
Universal. It was one of their main monsters. Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman.
Frankenstein was more of a. That was a book.
Yeah, that was a book, and it's, by the way, a very fucking depressing book. By the way, I got
I feel bad.
I got so sad.
Listen, Frankenstein didn't deserve what he got in that book.
No,
He just
No.
wanted to live a happy life.
He was also intelligent, unlike the Frankenstein of the film.
Yeah, the Frankenstein of the film was stupid, but the Frankenstein of the book was actually, he read books.
yeah,
He even described himself as the devil at one point.
yeah, but the Frankenstein of the book is not a good person at all. Not to say that the movie one is, but
He's sympathetic.
I felt really bad for the monster in the book.
I mean, that's the whole point.
Oh, wait. When you say Frankenstein was an idiot, are you mean Frankenstein the monster or Frankenstein the creator?
Because both weren't stupid.
I just call it the monster. I don't call it Frankenstein's monster. Cause...
Okay. Because we because I was a little confused when I say like Frankenstein was a bad person. I was like, I don't think the monster Frankenstein was a bad person in the book. Like everything was kind of forced.
No, the book monster is that's what made me fucking sad. And I don't know if this was in the original version, but it was in the one that I read. But it was actually a flute scene that kind of broke me, because he was really worried and somewhat confused as to why he could play a flute so well, and he was wondering, is it because of my lips or is it because of my hands? And it was just that simple part that kind of made me a little fucking sad a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
It's also because Victor Frankenstein himself is just a fucking bad he's just a bad dad.
Yeah, he's a terrible person. I mean, he reanimates a bunch of bodies. I mean, come on.
Because if we're going by the book, he abandons his creation the very moment of its birth.
Because he can't. I think a huge part of that book is that Victor Frankenstein absolutely does not want to take responsibility for his own actions. So, like a true deadbeat father, he runs away. He keeps trying to run away from his problems, blaming other people, which is, his ultimate downfall in the novel because
Well, in the
he's
novel,
kind of a
in
fucking
in
asshole.
the novel, it doesn't necessarily say that it's his downfall. It's more of implied that it's going to come one day.
Yeah, he's gonna get he's gonna be reprehended one day for it, which
Because I do believe that the book simply ends with, Frankenstein knowing that the monster is out there and it's trying to find him.
I think the book ends with Victor Frankenstein having died of a heart attack or something, or of old age.
no, he
and
didn't die of
then-
old age. He died on a ship.
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
novels.
He died. Yeah, but I think he died on a ship of old age.
It's been a while, so I'm sorry about that.
And then the last thing you read is about the guy seeing a figure whom we assume is the monster, skating away from the ship deep into the Antarctic.
That was the
Right,
Arctic.
right.
Or
I knew
Arctic,
it was in the Arctic or like Siberia, but I couldn't remember if it was before the doctor died or after.
Fun fact: the Antarctic was conceived by the Romans before it was even, or by the Romans or the Greeks, I can't remember, before it was even discovered.
Yeah,
'Cause
but it wasn't ice. They thought it was a grassland.
Yeah,
It
that's
used
fair.
to be. It used to be.
And here's the thing. Christians believed there was a Christian king all the way down there who would help them fight the Muslims. But that's a little off topic.
Now,
That's a
hang-
story for
now
another
hang
day.
on.
There was a Christian king, Santa.
Santa? Oh my god.
Alright,
Nazis.
alright.
Wrong call.
Wrong
Oh.
pull. God bless. But there's
gotta
also
go north.
gotta go north.
I mean,
But,
Santa is a monster if you think about it.
Dude,
Yeah, he is.
Santa's fucking horrifying.
Yeah, but thank God he he doesn't come into your house and chop your head off. He just he sends another guy to do that for him.
I mean,
Depends which Santa we're talking
yeah,
about,
wh-
because
wh-
there's
which
that
Santa?
SCP Santa that's kind of fucked up.
yeah, I don't want to talk about SCP Santa because I actually hate that one. Great file, well written, and they did a great job. But I hate that SCP. Legit.
I don't know that SCP. You should tell me
one's
about
that
that
one
SCP.
Well, it's kind of on topic when it comes to monsters. It's basically a Santa Claus that shows up randomly in a household or close to a family that has, is on a certain border of the northern hemisphere, and he can show up there at any time, and as long as there's snow there, especially. So it has to have snow there at the time. But
Okay.
if it has like a child at the minimum age of 3, I think, he will stalk the household for a couple of days on end. And upon the day of Christmas Eve, he will show up to the house and either give gifts or he will torture the family members horrifically, except for the youngest member, which he will kidnap and put in a sack. And when they examine the gifts that he does leave, they found out that they're made of human remains almost all of the time. And they eventually found a live girl who was quote unquote a doll, and she described how he would force the children to make toys out of each other if they had no material.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's
Dude, that's a monster.
yeah, it's
Kind of a-
I hate it.
It's a little mix of Santa and a little mix of Krampus.
That
Yeah,
reminds
yeah,
me
Krampus
of,
is what I was
in a
thinking of.
That
fucked up
reminds
way.
me. That reminds me of a tale. There's a salmonella video they made on it of the one the girl that would not the girl, the witch basically of the Alps who if you were a bad kid she would rip out your intestines and stuff you with
Stuff you with
linen and-
straw until you were just as full as she left you.
just as until you're just as plump as she left you. That to me is still one of the most terrifying Christmas monsters.
Yeah,
Because-
but it's like Norwegian too, isn't it?
No, it's not. That's it's German.
Oh, yes.
Classic.
Not any German. Bavarian.
Oh, classic.
Classic.
Bavarian and Swiss.
Classic.
Cross, you guys have some fuck
the,
legends.
No, the best one's still the
Bruh.
Icelandic one. The
The
Yule
Swiss
lads.
have such a shitty folklore, man. At least from what I have managed to find. The only one original Swiss creature I can think of is just a tiny it's just like a dwarf-sized little thing with giant feet, and the point of the giant feet is it uses those giant feet to ski down the mountains.
Skiing Swiss woman.
And then the only other one I can think of was about that story of how a dude shot an apple off of a guy's head with a fucking crossbow.
Which is a story from England.
Yeah, which is just pretty much a carbon copy of the story from England, except instead of a bow and arrow, it's a crossbow, because I don't know, the Swiss really like crossbows.
I still can't get over the Yule lads. That's still one of my favorite stories.
That is a horrifying story because
The guys who will come
of-
into your
one
night.
of them is like door licker.
One of the it's door slammer who slams doors. Then there's a spoon licker who licks spoons and is very malnourished. Then you have a skier gobbler who drinks all your skier, which is like just an Icelandic yogurt. And then you have fucking window peeper, and you have you also have door sniffer who would with this gigantic nose and sniff your doors in search of bread.
Why would there be bread in my door?
No, it'd sniff your door to make sure if you had bread inside that room, and they would come in your room and eat your breadcrumbs.
Oh, motherfucker! That's my bread.
Yeah, what an
The
asshole.
only monsters that rival Iceland in being inconvenient as possible are the Japanese ones.
Well,
Which
they
ones?
have
Which
so
ones?
many, because they have some which are inconvenient, quote unquote, and then there are others where it's just you're dead.
Like,
I'm talking the one that cuts your hair in your sleep and gives you a shitty haircut,
that's,
Motherfucker.
that's just an asshole.
or the one
That's
the
not-
one
that's
that,
not inconvenient. That's just an asshole.
there's also the fox girl, the kitsune, which were basically just foxes, right? That would come out, and their whole thing was they would dress up as beautiful women so men could fuck them. And they're like, haha, pranked, and they run off. Like, well,
They're like, haha, you actually had sex with the fox, you weirdo.
Well, you're a
Furries in 2020.
Furry, you're a furry, haha.
imagine people today be like, yeah, I beat them. The fox is like, what the fuck? The kitsune just looks over. There's also the one which has an eye for an asshole.
Yep. I
That's
don't think
one
it
of
does anything. It's just kind of weird looking.
It pranks
Yeah,
you and then runs off. It pranks you. It's like, hey, it's like, you want my eyes? Like, where? It just shows you his ass and runs off. No.
Actually, speaking of that, I kind of do want to harken back then to, I know this was a while ago, fucking the kaiju thing. He interesting connects kaiju to yokai, quite directly. For example, the guy, just to reiterate his name, so I'm not stealing anybody's ideas here. Cite your sources, children. Jason Barr. He connects Kumanga, I think his name is the monster's name. To
Very original monsters, just a giant spider.
to Tsuchigomo, which was a giant spider lady. King Caesar, which connects that to the Chinese Shishi,
Mm-hmm.
Shusi, who are the guardian dogs, you know. King Ghidorah, it connects it to to a Chinese myth, the Tatsu, which were dragons that varied in depiction wildly. Like, some were the more classical, what you think of Chinese dragons, whiskers, long snouts, no wings and anything, but also had descriptions that included wings and included other features. Hence why you have King Ghidorah, which is a huge mix of all these different, like, dragonic parts.
Yeah, it's like a mixture of the Hydra, but the Western dragon and the Oriental one at the same time. And you can argue that it's somewhat of a mixture of Arabic ones too.
Well, that's the thing. It's not just Oriental, because these Tatsu some were depicted to have wings and everything.
Well, yeah, but you can see like inherently Western traits within Ghidorah, like how he acts, the way he, just looks in some depictions, because you can especially tell with the heads of the newer one, he looks like a Western dragon, and even his wings are more, Western inspired, more like a bat. So sorry, continue though. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And I think it connects as well Gahara, the long-haired monster, to the cool. I think it's the cool hexagon. Or the Keku Kegen. Sorry, my fucking writing is terrible. The Keku Kegen, which is another yokai. So then it's very interesting. He connects these very direct, like it's not even like generic things. It's very direct connections, which the Keku Geken or Keu Kegen. That's so tough. It's it's funny because it is it causes people to get sick, but it just looks like a giant hairy dog. But here's the thing: it doesn't specify how sick. It just says, yeah, it lives in damp, dark places, and if it's near a house, the people inside will get sick because it's a disease spirit. But who knows, man? Who knows how long that is or how bad that is?
You just get a really bad cough.
I was to say, dude, like your allergies like act up. You're like, oh my god, this is terrible. I've been damned by a spirit.
That damn Gakuchin.
Speaking of spirits and shit, so maybe to wind this down back to because we've been talking for like is it almost 2 hours?
Oh,
Close.
at least an hour and a half, I would say.
I was just gonna, maybe we could talk about mythological creatures as a finale before we end it.
Sure.
That'd be
I mean, I'm going to do my best to not talk about dragons because you know me. You know me. But werewolves.
Ooh, mythological werewolves.
Yeah, I fucking
The wolf.
yeah, the wolf. It's actually very interesting to see how werewolves sort of evolved. And I was talking to Historical here earlier before the stream about it. Different cultures in Europe somewhat viewed wolves differently, but they all had the same similar idea behind a werewolf of some kind. Because the Romans, they believed in wolf-headed men who were brutal savages who would kill without mercy, these horrifically brutal, warriors. And the Norse, they believed, oh, if I wear the head of a wolf, I will become a wolf and I will be able to fight like one. Which, very similar idea, just base hand, but obviously different tone, different perspective in that, sort of mindset. But as we move into like the Christian and the Middle Ages, we see ideas like that, which probably were inspired by pagans and all that. We see that turned into like, oh, it's a demon. Oh, a witch gave it to me. It's awful. Is this a curse? Is this evil? I kill people. It's bad. Go ahead.
One of the most famous things that they would do, especially the Catholic Church, is when they entered an area, people still had folklore, right? And when they converted the pagans, though, they wanted to make sure to the pagans' descendants because, a pagan's going to tell their kids stories about how, for example, let's say you're a Welsh peasant, right? And the Welsh actually had Welsh Celtic paganism at the time had a higher regard to dragons than other mythologies did. They saw them as noble beasts, kind of like they're still bad guys in some novels, but they're also more proud creatures than anything. And what the church would do is they say, oh yeah, this dragon, he's the
devil.
He's evil, basically. The devil, literally the devil, or one of the most famous, literally the patron saint of England is Saint George,
who killed a dragon.
Who slaughtered a dragon in Armenia.
Which again, it connects to the werewolf thing where they take something that was already there, but they immediately turn it into something more evil, more malevolent somehow.
And one of my favorites is the westernized angel that is not my favorite.
Oh yeah, a baby with wings. Ooh.
A huge part of that actually did come from when they were Christianizing the Germanics.
I hate it. I
Because
want the
they
cool
try to make
angels
it
back.
They wanted to inspire it because look, how do we convert these Swedes and Germanics? I know. Let's give them wings.
Let's make
Let's
the
make
angels cute and PG.
Let's make them Valkyries.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And then the Renaissance came over and they're like, let's make it all human. Like, fuck that. Give me the eldritch horrors that are the biblical angels.
Yeah.
Give me
I want 3 flaming rings with eyes on all of them, with a flaming baby in the center.
with wielding a flaming sword coming down and saying, "Be not afraid." That would scare the shit out of me.
Yeah,
I
that's
would feel.
the funniest thing where I also did not know about this. So I was like, man, why would Michael or whatever be really afraid when the angel came down? And it'd be like, oh, well, if that's what it's supposed to look like, yeah, I can see why you would have to tell the guy not to be afraid. Because if I saw that, I'd be like, huh, okay, well, this is terrible. This is a bad
This is a Lovecraftian demon.
Also, but one of the most famous ones is the story of the vampire as well. Is very interesting to me
It's different from the others, I've noticed.
because it was actually completely made in Christian Europe. It wasn't, the werewolf or the dragon, which had origins in pagan mythologies.
Yeah, it was purely Christian.
It was a purely because it developed in Eastern Europe when they because people would die, and they say, "Look, guys, look!" They open the body and they see,
The hair is grown.
the hair's grown. But even though it's actually the body decomposing.
I actually gotta go.
Oh.
Something's coming up.
Well,
Sorry.
Very quick, but let's just cut this off to the end then. Sorry that you have to go across.
Yeah, sorry, I have to go now. Bye.
It's alright. See you later,
Cross
Cross.
guard. Bye.
All right, well, let's say our favorite mythological creatures, and then we can call it quits.
Mine are a little obvious, aren't they?
Well,
Werewolves.
yeah, how
Were-
about
werewolf
we
and
do
dragon.
something on topic real quick though?
Okay.
This
How
is
about
on
we do
topic.
favorite monster kaiju movie?
Oh,
Ooh.
well. Like movie period.
Yeah.
That's tough. That is really tough.
Okay. Favorite monster movie and then favorite kaiju movie together.
Monster movie?
You're making
Okay,
it tough.
well-
Now I have to think. Okay. I'll lock it down.
I was
with
gonna say, I'll
2.
give you guys some time to think real quick.
But do you have yours?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I already got mine pretty easily.
Tell us yours then. Tell us yours.
Gamera. And the
Poland.
Gamera trilogy, because it's one of the few trilogies that actually just picks up and gets better over the course of time, and there's no movie after Gamera 3. I promise you, there's no movies after Gamera 3, it just ends at 3.
It really does just.
Poland,
end at
don't
3.
tell me otherwise.
Well, there's one more, but that's not connected to the trilogy, so don't worry. It's not that bad.
And my favorite monster movie would be Dawn of the Dead.
Oh,
You like Dawn of the Dead?
Yeah, I went through a whole phase of loving zombies, but I actually did a whole paper over it to pass English, since my English professor was all about the study of horror and examining horror as a whole. But if we ever cover the topic again, we can hop into that. So
I wasn't a very big guy on zombies, to be honest.
Well, I'm gonna lock myself down on two options.
all right, what you got?
I'm going to lock myself down on Pacific Rim for favorite kaiju movie because, come on, you know
I
me.
agree.
I love Pacific
agree.
Rim so much,
I love Pacific Rim 2. That's also my favorite kaiju film.
and
Taking
it's
that
a
blank-
standalone movie. You don't have to worry about sequels. What are you talking about?
There is no sequel.
Yeah, there is no
sequel.
Yeah,
sequel. There is no sequel.
No sequel at all. Pacific
I mean,
Rim.
There's a fan made. There's a shitty fan made movie,
Yeah.
but we don't talk about that.
It had a surprising budget, but it's just fan made. Anyway,
Just
but
fan made.
Yeah,
my
fan-made.
my
But
favorite
other movie.
my favorite monster movie. I don't care if any of you call me out on this. I'm going to lock down on it, and I will defend it until the day I die, even though I know it's shit. Underworld 3.
Okay, listen, Kai. You just lost my
Underworld 3.
I lost some respect for you when you said that. I'm like,
I don't care. I don't care.
Not Underworld 1, not Underworld 2, but Underworld 3.
No. Underworld 1 and 2, pretty good movies, but Underworld 3? That's the
Why
one.
do you love that film? Why?
A lot of
Why?
reasons.
I know why.
A lot of
I know
reasons.
why he loved.
A lot of reasons. I love that movie. I love the series.
It's-
I love the series actually. Fucking love the series. 10 out
Series
of
is
10.
good. Series is good.
Yeah. 3, best one.
Oh man, that's such a hot take, but you know what? I respect you for making it.
Very hot take, I know,
Oh,
but I'll stand by it.
That take is straight out of the oven hot.
It's out
Okay,
of the
okay.
lava.
let me ask. What makes it like? What is the? If you had to select one reason as the defining reason why 3 is the one for you, well, what is it?
Well, see, I can't pick one reason alone because I actually do have a lot of reasons. Because the first two movies, we see kind of the backstory of, the main werewolf bad guy, right? We see, like, little hints. We see little hints of the main vampiric bad guy and all that. So it kind of builds up to 3, so you're getting somewhat excited in the origin of this huge, long blood feud. So that alone makes it pretty big for me. 2, I actually like the cheesy and stupid romance between, the main lead and the vampire girl. I like the cheesy romance, even though it's
That's what I hated. That was shit to me.
I
I'm like,
liked
no,
it.
I don't
I
like
liked it.
this.
I also like the scene where he has to watch her burn alive, and you see him in horrible pain. I liked that.
I clapped at that scene. I'm like, finally, yes.
Also,
Dead.
just saying, every scene where the werewolves finally got together and started charging at the vampires to kill them, that was hype as fuck.
All right, all right. I see where you're coming from. I see what you're stepping in, man. Like,
Yeah.
there's definitely some lows, but there's definitely high points in there too.
Oh,
And like for me,
the lows make it for
like
me. The lows make it too.
We need it. We need to. I want to watch this movie. Force Crosshair along and see him have like a
We'll watch
completely
the
different
entire fucking
reaction.
series if I have my way in it. I'll watch the entire
I'll
series.
watch the entire series. And we'll just see like Poland especially is gonna writhe in pain. Just be like, no, stop.
I don't care if any of you hate it. I don't care if you actually want to die afterward. I will love it. I love that series.
We better speak. We're gonna speak during it. We don't give a shit.
Okay.
all right, historical. All right, what are your 2 movies?
Favorite kaiju film. I already said it's Pacific Rim. I love that film.
Hell yeah.
Okay, all right.
But Gamera of the Trilogy comes a close second.
Gamera 3.
Well, what's your first?
What's the
Pacific
first?
Rim? Pacific Rim
I
is
already
his first.
Yeah,
Oh
Pacific
yeah.
Rim is my
But your monster
Okay, then
movie-
what's your monster film though?
That's hard because I already said one of my favorite that's my favorite horror film is The Thing, and it's the
You could lock down
1982
on
film.
that. You could lock down on that because it is a monster movie.
It technically is a monster movie, and that's it's also it's just really fucking
Good
good.
movie.
That
Good movie too.
It's a good ass movie.
I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna die on that hill saying it's the best horror film of all time, but
I argue Alien's the better one, but I respect your opinion.
I respect, yeah, exactly. But if I say that my favorite monster, that's that's fucking hard
Yeah, that's
because there's a
why
lot of good ones.
that's why we didn't pick favorite monster because we all knew that one would be hard.
Movie,
not for me.
but even then that's also really hard because I really enjoyed
Like I said, Alien was pretty.
the
Good.
1970s BBC edition of Dracula is one of my favorite. Was one of my favorites, and the Coppola Dracula. Those are some of my favorite films.
For some reason, I really want to end it there because that seems so awfully horrifically specific.
What? That I know this
The
much about
70s
Dracula.
BBC Dracula movie.
Yeah,
The big black.
Shut the fuck up! It's the British
Black.
Broadcasting Corporation. It's the British
Alright,
Broadcasting
guys.
Corporation.
Alright,
Americans,
yeah,
come.
As
Fucking
always,
BBQ barbarians.
As always, this is Kaiju. You can always follow me on my Twitter.com, and as you know, the Twitch that you are watching on right now, twitch.tv/KaijuDragon567. You can catch Palm at. Go ahead.
Hey, this is Palm. You can catch me at Twitch TV/PalmTopTyrant. I promise I'll stream again soon. And this is our boy Historical.
You can find me inside Kai's house to slaughter him in cold blood.
That's correct. Anyway, catch you later, guys. Watch out for another epic episode of the podcast.